And we're live.
I have watched your section talking about watches with Joe Rogan 6 times now.
I don't know if I told you, like, the last time I was on your show, that the first time I talked about watches with Joe Rogan and we started talking about Grand Seikos and stuff, I got a letter from the CEO of Grand Seiko thanking me for like promoting their business in America. Like, the Joe Rogan bump is very real.
I imagine.
It's a very real bump.
There's something interesting about watching a guy talk about his interests. You know, if he's truly a subject matter expert, he could talk about games, television, watches. I don't have a big interest in watches day to day, but I've watched you talk about it for hours now because it's cool.
Well, I mean, look, if you're into machines, whether it's cars and planes or guns or factories or even computers, you know, it's artistry combining with engineering. And so a lot of the things that people like about cars and motorcycles and planes and guns and jewelry it all applies, you know. Plus, a lot of guys don't like to admit this, but I'm okay with it. It's cool to want a trophy, and a watch is a good trophy. We don't get to, like, you and I can't walk around with like big diamond earrings and be taken seriously to express a level of trophiness. but you can walk around with a $20,000 or $30,000 watch, and you know, people don't really look at you sideways.
Well, I don't know how many people recognize that trophy. Like, I think I would.
Very few.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
few.
I mean,
I will tell you this: way more people notice me and my hoop earrings than your watch. If we're talking about a trophy.
No, I think if you're talking about trophies, more people would probably notice like sneakers. Like if you had some sick Jordans that were hard to find or something, more people would probably notice that than a watch. A watch, if you really want to get noticed, you got to go with the staples, and you got to go. It's all about brand. If you really want to get noticed by like not watch people, which are, you know, I don't know, gold Rolex. That's how you get.
That's the one. Right?
You get people to watch.
That's the one I would know. If you had a,
yeah,
I can't even name another high end watch. Like
I have a watch.
One with
it's
an
called, not to brag, but it's called an Audemars Piguet, and it's shaped like an octagon. It's not round, you know, and it's quite expensive, and there are not really a lot of them around. But it doesn't, if you don't know watches, nobody, I mean, I wear it all the time. Nobody ever says anything. I mean, no one ever looks at it twice. But like, if you are, I have owned a gold Rolex before for like a month. I got rid of it. I was like, this is not me. And people will just be like, nice to meet you. What the, and they'll just be like Marcellus Wallace's briefcase, you know, down at your wrist.
It's like you've got really good cleavage and you're catching them all the time. Like, come on.
If you want to meet women in their 40s at Mastro's Ocean Club, you wear a gold Submariner and sit at the bar with an open collar, and you are good to go.
I remember when I was like 12, I got a crappy Fossil watch for my birthday from some uncle or something. And because like in my head, I was like, watches, that's what grown-ups wear. I was like, I have to be really serious about this. Like, this is a responsibility. It's a piece of shit, like 25. I remember like jumping into the pool with it and getting out and being like, oh my God, my Fossil watch, and like taking it off and like drying it. And then
you still have it? I bet we're right. It's far enough. Time has passed that it's probably moving into ironic cool at this point.
About to be disintegrated somewhere by now.
What's on your wrist right now, Matt?
This is a cool one, man. This one is a watch called a Weiss. This is called a Weiss American issue field watch. And what makes this watch extremely cool is that my friend Cameron Weiss made it. He is a watchmaker. Wow. He's a young guy in his 30s. And he started this company, Weiss Watch Company, in California. And he doesn't just make the watch, he designs and manufactures the movement and all of the parts in the movement. So this watch is 100% made in LA. All of the parts are made in California for this watch. And this particular one is very special because it's a paint to sample Bugatti French Racing blue dial. And it's the only one he ever made with this color. It's for me. So if you look on the back, you can just see the number 1. It just says 1. And so these are really, really cool.
One of one, so that people know.
I kind of complained about that. and I was like, what the fuck, bro? And he was like, never say never. You know what I'm saying? Like, why shut the door on yourself? You know?
Well, I hope he's prepared for the
price.
influx of customers. There may be half dozens of people contacting him.
I really, really recommend people buy. I mean, you know, you cannot get more patriotic than buying really, really artisan crafts designed and made in America. So
How much is a watch? Can you say the name again? I want to Google it. What?
Weiss
W-E-I-S-S?
Watch Company, WEISS, and I believe it's just weisswatchcompany.com. And their watches are like 1,800 to 4,000.
How long does it take him to build a watch?
Like in hours? I think it's probably like 30 hours or something.
So he's the guy sitting there with the light and the thing.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And he has like one or two assistants at this point that do some of the other assembly, and he has one guy who runs the CNC machines because he owns 2 CNC machines. Yo, they CNC like the smallest little cog wheels. They're measured in like microns. I mean, it's the smallest shit. It's so cool, that stuff. I can't. I love when people can like make things, like make this from scratch. The what
machine you're talking about that makes that? What is that?
A CNC machine?
CNC, yeah.
Yeah, like it's like a big mill, like a computer controlled thing that mills out little parts. So you like program in a code, and it stick in a block of metal, and it goes picture and out comes a part.
I'm sorry, Taylor. You know what a drill press is?
Mm-hmm.
Right, where the bit comes down. This is like a motorized bit that can travel around. So you could, you know, your Apple laptop.
It's like a reverse 3D printer.
Yeah, that's pretty good, actually.
Actually, yes, it's a 3D subtractor. Exactly what it is. Yes.
And it's sort of omnidirectional, so it can come at a piece of stock,
and it has multiple different bits.
Angle.
So it can take out different bits and change and does a sanding thing, and then another bit, and it's fair. They're fucking badass.
It used to be like $1 million, but
they're still $1 million.
Well, they're all over it's become like woodworkers buy them now, and it's not an abnormal tool for a hobbyist woodworker to have. And those would cost like $5 or $7 grand. So it's a big investment, but it
depends on what they do, right? So like one that's like the size of a bar fridge, you know, that could work on objects, you know, the size of a softball, right? Something like that is what you're talking about, like 10 grand, right? If you want one that is big enough to do metal and that can make, let's call it wheels, like forged wheels for cars, like HRE Wheels in Vista, California makes probably the best aftermarket wheels in the world. They're very, very well made, very well engineered, and very expensive. And they have these giant things, and they literally put in like an enormous cylinder of forged aluminum, and it cuts them out. And it takes, 6 hours or whatever to cut them out. It's really crazy. So one of those, or one like Cameron Weiss has, which can make the tiny little parts. Those are still the really expensive ones.
In woodworking, I imagine the tolerances aren't quite as tight as anything like watchmaking.
Yeah.
You can get one that does 4x4 sheets, and it's efficient. So if your cuts have to go all the way across the sheet, there are only so many clever ways you can maximize. You're going to have more scrap. On the other hand, if you're coming in from the top and every cut is exactly where you want it to be, and your scrap looks like, you buy a paper of stickers and there's all the weird, they really maximize how much. When your scrap doesn't have to be straight lines that go all the way across the wood, it's much more efficient. Doesn't matter for a hobbyist, but it's cool.
So in terms of the craft of old school watchmaking, traditional watchmaking, a CNC machine is pretty much the most advanced piece of equipment you could have and still be called traditional watchmaking, right? There's this new dude who I interviewed, and he was out of his fucking mind, and his company is called Barrel Hand Watches, and he's got a new company, and he's using additive manufacturing, better known as 3D printing. So his watch is insane, and it's made using parts that, because they're 3D printed, they couldn't exist. You couldn't physically mill that with a CNC machine, the way that you can 3D print or manufacture in an additive way. And so for this guy's first watch he's ever made is like $30,000, and it's just so crazy looking. It looks like a space communicator, and so they're doing some crazy stuff. And material science is very strong in watchmaking as well.
Watches are interesting. So I'm really out of my depth here, but it's like they've solved the timekeeping problem a while back. Now it's this like Rube Goldberg machine, a more complicated way to solve it. Odd ways how can we solve this with a little more flair, a little more artisan?
Yes, it's complexity for complexity's sake. And that is where it starts to get really, really fun and crazy. There's people that there's a thing called a tourbillon, which, okay, we're going to go into the weeds a little bit here, but a watch has a mainspring, which is where its energy is stored, the fuel tank, right? And that mainspring slowly unwinds in a controlled way. And the unwinding is done through something called the escapement. In the watch, if you were talking about a car, the mainspring would be an engine, the escapement would be the transmission, telling you how much power to put to the ground from an engine that's spinning at a constant speed, right? Mm-hmm. And so in wristwatches, because you're moving your wrist around all the time, it doesn't matter so much that this spring is this flat coil susceptible to gravity. But back in the day, pocket watches were always kind of in your pocket like this. So if you've got a spring that's a coil spring, it's going to sag over time. So they developed something called a tourbillon. A tourbillon is a cage like Tommy Lee's drum set that spins the thing around to evenly distribute gravitational force around this spring, right? Are you following? Am I too far in the woods here? Okay, now they have another thing called a flying tourbillon, which is like, them things where the gravitrons, where you go in this and spin around. So it's one of those for the hairspring. So now it's not just spinning like this, it's spinning on 4 axes like this. And there are watches that, for pure complexity's sake,
all to solve a problem we don't have.
It's a problem you don't have.
What time is it? Do you have 14 minutes for me to tell you how I got the time?
It's so funny. My good friend, Chef Carl Ruiz, may he rest in peace, would call these types of watches lecturer's watches because you'd have to explain them to everybody. But they now have watches that have multiple flying tourbillons, which do nothing. So imagine if this watch were a car, it would have okay. And this is a watch that ultimately tells time. It has two fucking hands on it, maybe 3. So these tourbillons, they're spinning like this, like just big flashy spinning titties, right? There's 2, sometimes even 3, maybe 4 of these things. Imagine your car had 1 engine, 4 transmissions, but was 1-wheel drive. So imagine the power went out 4 ways and then came back together to 1 out drive. And why would you do that? And the guy went, look at the thing I did though. And you go, well, that doesn't improve the performance at all. In fact, it really just makes it more complicated. And he goes, it is more complicated. That's why it costs 10 times as much as the one that you're wearing. And you go, well, that seems awfully needless. And he goes, exactly. And that's how the watch industry works. There's other like useful complications. Like I had a watch called a perpetual calendar, which is just a crazy math machine. And that will do the time, the date, the day, the month, the year, 4 digits. It knows it knows how many days are in each month. It knows when all the leap years are. And it also had a fuel gauge, so it could tell you how much power it had remaining. And that watch, if you kept it running, would only have to be adjusted once every 400 years.
Thank God, because whenever I set like the date on my watch and it only goes forward, that makes me crazy. If it kept track of 10,000 years,
everything,
how long would it take me to go all the way around again?
So I have that same watch. It also does that.
Yeah,
just Google Calendar as well.
This thing. But imagine something that was this big, but it had 900 pieces inside of it that mathematically could calculate all that shit. It's really, really neat. I mean, That watch came with, because it's a 4-digit year, right? So it said 2019 when I had it, right? 2019. And the year, go up every year, right? Blah, blah, blah. Well, it came with a replacement first 2 digits. So it came with a 22. So in the year 2199, you would take it to an IWC store and they'd replace the first 2 digits of the year with the 2200.
Wow.
Ridiculous.
Needless.
Totally stupid. And here's the problem. You know why I don't have it anymore? Because if I wasn't wearing it all the time, I had to keep it on a watch winder to keep it going. If it stops, then setting all that shit correctly again is a fucking nightmare. You have to take it to a shop basically to get it set. So you have to keep it going. So you have to keep it on a watch winder. But that means you can't keep it in the safe with the rest of the watches. So now you've got this ridiculously expensive watch just spinning around on your nightstand. It's literally the first thing that any potential thief would steal.
Yeah,
and put a light on it too.
and they know this, and so
appreciate all the mechanisms. And
it's like a disco ball, and so it just was so stressful.
This watch sucks. It's only going to be fine for 200 more years.
At first, I was like, I'm going to keep this thing going, and it's the mission. Yeah, this will be a fun game. And then I'm like, someone's going to steal this thing.
How much does it cost?
It was like $25,000.
Oh my God.
It was expensive.
There's no room in the safe for a watch winder?
There's no what?
Yeah,
there's no room in the safe for a watch winder.
Well, no, they're kind of big, and you have to get power in there too. So most safes don't have a way to get. I don't know about most, but certainly the one I have doesn't have a hole for power. And if you were to drill one, did you drill a hole in the back? You did? Really?
Yeah.
What do you have charging in the safe that you needed power for?
You put a video recording DVR in there. So if you've got surveillance.
Oh, that's cool. That's smart. That may I wonder if that negates the fireproofness.
Only
of it,
slightly. It's an 1/8-inch drill bit.
It's not. You know what? I think it's a good plan. I'm going to consider that.
Wearing a mask if they made it that far, right?
I'm going to consider that, but I've already sold the watch, so.
I think it was a federal regulation, right? Like
no.
You don't think the guy robbing your house is going to have a mask if he makes it all the way to the safe?
He certainly is in 2020. He needs a mask to go in the fucking anywhere. 2020. If you don't, if you're not wearing a mask while doing crimes in 2020, you have really lost the plot.
Not only are you dumb, you're just inconsiderate.
You have taken none of the advantages that life and circumstance have given you.
You'll see somebody like looting a Best Buy in video, and it's like, you're the only guy without a mask. Like, do you not look around and be like, yeah, at least getting a little bit of facial coverage so that the security camera.
Like, bro, all right, take the TV, but just don't cough on me, bro.
Yeah.
It's
mad at a guy for breaking into your house because he's not wearing a mask.